Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive, honestly shocking reality. Imagine a technology so revolutionary it could do the work of 10 people for a tenth of the price. That was the huge promise of artificial intelligence when it first exploded onto the scene, right? Companies were scrambling to integrate it, absolutely thrilled by the prospect of slashing budgets and boosting efficiency. But today? Well, that honeymoon phase is completely over. We are looking at how AI morphed from a miraculous, super cheap alternative to human labor into this colossal, budget-breaking corporate expense that has boardrooms across the globe in a literal panic.
Okay, let's dive right into this core paradox we're facing today. Just a few short years ago, the headline across basically every industry was fear. The fear that AI was a technology designed to just take away your job. From tech giants to fast food drive-thrus, no roles seemed entirely safe. But the narrative has completely flipped. What happens when the technology meant to cheaply replace human workers becomes simply too expensive to scale? We are shifting dramatically from an era of job displacement panic straight into an era of absolute AI cost panic.
To understand how we got here, let's quickly walk through the timeline. Back in 2022, the launch of ChatGPT triggered an absolute frenzy. We saw massive layoffs, with companies adopting AI exponentially and reducing their teams across major corporations like Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta. AI was supposedly cheaper to maintain, right? But fast forward to 2025, and this bizarre cultural shift, the Tokenmaxxing era, took over Silicon Valley, which we'll break down in just a second. And that brings us to 2026, the current era of crushing AI bills, canceled data centers, and massive tech stock sell-offs.
To give you a real sense of just how expensive things have become, using Claude these days is kind of like driving a Ferrari. Except, well, this Ferrari burns through your IT budget instead of premium gas. And that's not just an exaggeration, it's a stark financial reality. Costs have climbed so aggressively that even the wealthiest tech giants are pulling the plug on their own teams. Microsoft, a company that practically bankrolled this current AI boom, actually had to ban its own employees from using certain AI models to generate code. An internal memo essentially said stop using it simply due to the exorbitant bills it was racking up. When the actual titans of the tech industry can't afford to run the software, you know the system is breaking.
Now you might be wondering, how on earth did these costs spiral out of control from the inside? Well, it comes down to a behavioral flaw called tokenmaxxing. Let me explain how this works. Companies measure AI usage in tokens. To put it in perspective, for text-based tasks, roughly 750 words cost about 1,000 tokens. And generating code, images, or video, that costs way more. As companies heavily pushed AI adoption, employees quickly realized that high token usage was viewed by management as a sign of being highly efficient. So they started artificially inflating their usage, using AI for every tiny, insignificant task just to climb company leaderboards. Burning through tokens became this bizarre status symbol, completely untethered from actual meaningful work. And this wasn't just rogue employees trying to look busy, either. This culture was pushed from the very top. Listen to this incredible quote from NVIDIA's CEO. "If that $500,000 engineer did not consume at least $250,000 worth of tokens, I'm going to be deeply alarmed." Wow. When leadership is actively incentivizing developers to burn through hundreds of thousands of dollars in tokens just to prove they're utilizing new tools, you are essentially pouring gasoline on a financial fire. The massive demand we were seeing, a huge chunk of it wasn't even real enterprise growth. It was artificially inflated by these internal metrics.
So the crucial point is that this wasn't just a single point of failure. It was a perfect storm compounding the AI cost crisis. First, you have that artificial demand from engineers juicing leaderboards. Then, because of the massive strain on physical infrastructure and electronic component shortages, nearly 50% of all U.S. data center projects planned for 2026 were actually canceled or delayed. When you combine fake, inflated software demand with a sudden, very real cap on physical data centers, it creates massive market anxiety. This bottleneck directly led to major tech stock sell-offs, dragging down the S&P and NASDAQ. Experts are rightfully asking, how much of this reported AI demand is actually real? To truly grasp the sheer scale of the spending, we need to look at the raw numbers. 60 trillion. Just let that sink in for a second. That is the staggering number of tokens Meta reportedly consumed in a single month. To put that abstract number into cold hard cash based on blended enterprise pricing, that equates to roughly $900 million, nearly $1 billion in just 30 days. When a company is churning through 60 trillion tokens, even a micro fraction of a cent increase in the price of a single token translates to an absolutely catastrophic hit to the annual budget. And those price increases, they aren't theoretical. They are happening right now. The average cost of large language model tokens has more than doubled since 2025. We went from an average of $1.11 per million tokens to $2.12. Now sure, that might sound like pocket change, but remember the scale we're dealing with here? AT&T reported consuming nearly 8 billion tokens every single day. If an average employee uses just $200 worth of tokens a week in a company of 90,000 employees, that is a $900 million annual expense. The AI bills have finally come due, and companies are blowing through their entire annual technology budgets in a matter of weeks.
And this brilliantly illustrates where all that money is actually going. We are literally witnessing one of the fastest wealth transfers in corporate history. Look at the revenue for Anthropic, one of the leading AI companies. In 2025, they ended the year with around $3 billion in revenue. By 2026, thanks to this massive enterprise adoption in Tokenmaxxing, they're projected to nearly triple that to $9.6 billion. For companies like Anthropic and OpenAI, this environment has been incredibly profitable on paper, but it comes at the direct expense of their enterprise clients' balance sheets.
But here is the most alarming part of this entire explainer. It's just the beginning of the exponential price hikes. We're on a very clear path here. First, massive global AI adoption. Second, despite that revenue growth, AI companies have been operating at a huge financial loss, basically subsidizing the cost of these tokens with abundant venture funding to capture market share. But that era is ending. Step 3, we have upcoming public company listings. Once these companies go public, Step 4 kicks in. Intense shareholder pressure to actually turn a profit. To do that, they have absolutely no choice but to multiply token prices exponentially. Which brings us to this staggering forecast. Global spending on AI is expected to hit $680 billion by 2027. That is more than double what companies spent in 2025. But you have to remember, these estimates were calculated using the current subsidized average costs of these tools. If the foundational AI companies are forced to multiply their token prices to satisfy Wall Street investors, that $680 billion figure could look like a drop in the bucket. If you're an investor, a business owner, or just someone who relies on tech infrastructure, this is the number that should wake you up. For corporate finance departments, this is turning into an absolute nightmare.
Let's move to and see how this builds into real-world hiring decisions today, when comparing AI agents to human labor costs. The entire premise of AI was that it was cheaper than humans, right? Well, that is no longer a universal truth. Yes, for coding tasks, AI remains undeniably cheaper. But look at data entry. The cost difference between paying a human and paying for tokens is now minimal. And in sectors like call centers, the math has completely inverted. Human labor is actually cheaper than running the AI models. Companies like Uber and Microsoft are already starting to second-guess their aggressive AI adoption because of this shifting economic reality.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question, a question no executive ever thought they'd have to answer so soon. Tokens or humans? Which one will companies keep? If technology costs exactly what humans cost, which one do you hold on to? The great irony of the artificial intelligence revolution is that the very tools built to permanently replace the human workforce might have just priced themselves out of a job. As the cost of tokens continues its exponential rise, we might just find that human labor is the most cost-efficient option after all. It's a fascinating reversal, and for sure, one that will define the economy of the next decade.